The road that led north was narrow and quiet, bordered by tall trees whose roots pressed through the cracked pavement like veins of an old memory. Rebecca drove slowly, her hands steady on the wheel, though her heart beat in uneven rhythms. The air outside the car was damp and heavy, the kind of mountain mist that never truly lifts. Through it, she could see the blurred shimmer of water ahead. Olivia sat beside her head, turned toward the window, tracing invisible lines on the fog glass with her finger. They had been on the road for hours without saying much. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been spoken in the 6 years that had passed since the accident. "Mom, is this the road that leads to the house Ethan always talked about?" Olivia's voice was small, barely audible above the engine and the distant roar of falling water. Rebecca tightened her grip on the steering wheel, nodding silently as the memory washed over her. Ethan, 8 years old, pointing excitedly at a waterfall during their last family hike. Through the mist, they had glimpsed a house built into the rock itself. "If I could live anywhere, it would be there behind the water. No one could hear the world there." She had laughed then, thinking it was just a child's fancy. Now those words had taken root inside her and refused to leave. 6 months ago, she'd received an anonymous email featuring properties in Riverstone County. Among them was that same waterfall house described as a fixer-upper with unique character. The timing had seemed coincidental then, right when she was looking for a fresh start, but now she wondered if anything in her life was truly coincidental anymore. The headlights caught a weathered sign, "Private road, no outlet." Beyond it, the pavement narrowed further, swallowed by encroaching wilderness. Rebecca checked the GPS again, though the signal had been spotty for miles. According to the realtor, the turnoff should be just ahead. 6 years since the night her world collapsed. A collision on a rain-slicked bridge, an overturned police cruiser, headlights in the darkness. Michael had died instantly, their son Ethan, shortly after at the hospital. She had survived only because she was at home with Olivia, who was barely old enough to understand what the word gone truly meant. In the years that followed, survival had become a ritual. Work bills, sleep, repeat. Days stretched thin, filled with things that had to be done, not things she wanted to do. The apartment they rented was small, perpetually cold, and smelled faintly of mildew, no matter how much she cleaned. But it was safe, and safety had been all she could afford. Rebecca's FBI pension covered the basics, but not much more. A month ago, she'd finally decided change was necessary. She'd been scrolling through property listings late at night when the real estate agent Carson Reed called about this place, almost as if he knew exactly when she'd be looking. The price was suspiciously low, but Rebecca had learned long ago that questioning good fortune often meant watching it slip away. The car rounded a sharp bend, and suddenly the forest opened up. A wooden bridge stretched across a rushing stream, and beyond it, partially obscured by mist in morning shadow, stood the silhouette of a structure built against the cliff face. The waterfall descended in a silver veil that concealed part of the house, just as Ethan had described. Rebecca pulled onto the small gravel area beside the bridge and cut the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy, punctuated only by the constant rush of the waterfall. She glanced at the dashboard clock, 10:17 a.m. The realtor was already 17 minutes late. An SUV appeared around the bend, kicking up dust as it pulled in beside them. A short, portly man with thinning hair stepped out, clutching a leather portfolio. Carson Reed, the realtor who'd listed the property, wore an expensive suit that seemed out of place against the wilderness backdrop. "Mrs. Stevens, I see you found it without trouble. Not too many folks can navigate these mountain roads their first time up." His smile didn't reach his eyes as he extended his hand. Rebecca took it briefly. "It's Ms. Stevens now, and I grew up in mountain country." The realtor's gaze shifted to Olivia, who remained in the car, then back to Rebecca with barely concealed skepticism. "Well, as I mentioned on the phone, this property is unique, very remote, requires significant renovation. Most single mothers looking to relocate prefer something more manageable. A woman alone couldn't possibly handle such a property. Is that what you're implying, Mr. Reed?" Rebecca's voice remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Her bureau training had taught her to recognize condescension and dismiss it without reaction. Reed chuckled, adjusting his tie. "I'm simply saying a place like this needs a man who knows his way around tools. The electrical needs complete rewiring, plumbing's shot roof leaks in at least 3 places I could find." Rebecca let the comment hang in the air for a moment before responding. "Fortunately, I have both a structural engineering background and FBI training in tactical operations. I think I can manage changing a few light fixtures and patching a roof." The man's patronizing smile faltered. "Of course. Well, shall we have a look then?" They crossed the small bridge, the wood creaking beneath their feet. Olivia finally emerged from the car, staying close to her mother. The path curved around an enormous boulder, and when they stepped through the veil of mist, the full view of the house appeared. It was larger than it had seemed from the road. A two-story structure of stone and weathered wood nestled against the cliff face, half concealed by the endless curtain of the waterfall. Sunlight broke through the clouds for a moment, catching on the water droplets so that they shimmered like glass. "Ethan was right," Olivia whispered, slipping her hand into her mother's. "You can't hear anything except the water." Inside, the house smelled of age and damp earth. The wooden floor creaked with each step, and the walls bore faint traces of where pictures once hung. In the main room, dust hung in the air, like smoke glowing in the pale light that filtered through the waterfall. But the bones of the place were strong. Thick beams of old cedar, a stone fireplace, narrow stairs leading to the upper floor. As Carson Reed droned on about property lines and easements, Rebecca's trained eye noticed details that didn't align with his story of a long-abandoned home. Fresh, muddy footprints led from the back door toward a small closet beneath the stairs. The hinges on the upstairs door looked newly replaced, the metal too clean compared to the rusted latches elsewhere. And in the basement, the faint smell of gasoline lingered, though there was no generator or stored fuel visible. Rebecca's tactical assessment was automatic, a habit from her days with the Bureau's Surveillance and Counterintelligence Division. The inconsistencies suggested recent activity, possibly within the last 48 hours. Someone had been here moving with purpose, making modifications. This wasn't just a neglected property. It was a location of interest. "The price seems unusually low," Rebecca observed, interrupting Reed's sales pitch. "What aren't you telling me about this place?" The realtor hesitated, glancing toward the window where the waterfall created constantly shifting patterns of light. "The previous owners left rather abruptly, 7 years ago now. Some locals say the place is haunted." He laughed, but the sound fell flat. "Real reason is the isolation. Most folks can't handle the silence, the constant sound of water. Gets to people after a while." Rebecca nodded, gazing up at the exposed beams. "And the price, $75,000 as listed. The bank's eager to get it off their books." The figure was less than half what she'd expected, even factoring in the remote location and needed repairs. By any metric, it was suspiciously low. But instead of raising further questions, Rebecca simply said, "I'll take it." Reed's eyebrows shot up. "Don't you want a home inspection first? There could be structural issues, water damage, mold." "I'll handle the inspections myself. How quickly can we close?" The realtor studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he saw or didn't see seemed to satisfy him. "I have the paperwork in my car. We could start the process today, close within the week if you're paying cash." By sunset, Rebecca had signed the preliminary papers and written a check for the earnest money. Carson Reed departed with one last dubious glance at the mother and daughter standing on the small bridge. As his SUV disappeared around the bend, Rebecca felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from pain. She was walking towards something. "Are we really going to live here?" Olivia asked, her voice echoing slightly over the water's constant roar. Rebecca nodded, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "We'll need to stay at a motel for a few weeks while I make it habitable. But yes, this is going to be our home." Olivia looked up at the house, her expression unreadable in the fading light. "Ethan would have loved it." "Yes," Rebecca whispered. "He would have." They returned the next morning with supplies, cleaning materials, basic tools, a camp stove, sleeping bags, and enough food for several days. Rebecca had booked a motel room in the nearest town 20 miles away, but planned to spend daylight hours working on the house. As she unlocked the front door, the strange sense that someone had been there after they left prickled at the back of her neck. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but years of FBI training had honed her intuition. She instructed Olivia to stay in the main room while she conducted a thorough sweep of the house, hand resting near her hip, where her Glock 19 was concealed. The house revealed nothing obvious, but outside fresh tire tracks in the soft earth near the back of the property confirmed someone had visited. Too narrow for Reed's SUV, these belonged to a different vehicle, possibly a truck with an off-road tread pattern. Rebecca took photos with her phone measuring the width and depth with a pocket ruler for future reference. Rebecca began the cleaning process methodically, starting with the kitchen. As Olivia wiped down the windows, Rebecca tackled the ancient gas stove, dismantling it piece by piece. It was salvageable with new parts. The refrigerator would need replacing, but the cabinets were solid oak beneath layers of grime. By mid-afternoon, they had made visible progress on the kitchen and started on the main living area. As Rebecca swept decades of dust from the stone hearth, a truck engine rumbled outside. She motioned for Olivia to stay put and moved silently to the front window, her hand automatically reaching toward her concealed weapon. An old blue pickup had parked by the bridge. An elderly man with a weathered face and white hair emerged carrying a paper bag. He walked with the slight stiffness of someone who had spent decades doing physical labor, but his movements remained purposeful. Rebecca noted the way his eyes scanned the perimeter, not casual observation but systematic assessment. Law enforcement, military, or both. Rebecca opened the door before he could knock, positioning herself in the doorway, blocking his view inside while giving herself optimal positioning for defensive action if necessary. "Afternoon, ma'am." The man's voice was deep and gravelly. "Frank Williams. I live about 2 miles down the mountain. Saw the activity up here and thought I'd welcome you properly." He offered the paper bag. "Sourdough bread, my late wife's recipe." Rebecca studied him for a moment before accepting the bag. His posture, the calluses on his hands, the way his eyes never stayed still, all spoke of a lifetime of vigilance. "Rebecca Stevens, my daughter Olivia's inside. Thank you for the bread." Frank nodded, his blue eyes clear and direct. "Carson Reed mentioned someone had finally bought the old Harmon place. Didn't expect you'd move in so quick." "We're not moved in yet, just cleaning." Rebecca hesitated, then stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" The old man entered, removing his worn baseball cap. "Been a sheriff in this county for 40 years before retiring. Never thought I'd see anyone living here again after what happened to the Harmons." Rebecca's investigative instincts sharpened. "What exactly happened to them?" Frank shrugged, running a hand along the wooden mantel. "Left in the middle of the night 7 years ago. No forwarding at address, no goodbye to neighbors, just up and vanished. Folks around here talk, of course. Some say they were in trouble with the wrong people. Others think the isolation finally got to them." He paused. "Truth is, nobody knows for certain. And after they left, place sat empty. Bank foreclosed eventually." Frank's gaze drifted to the window. "Though empty might not be the right word. Last few years I've spotted lights up here sometimes. Flashlights moving around at night." "You reported this?" Rebecca asked, keeping her tone casual, though her interest was anything but. Frank smiled faintly. "Current sheriff's a good kid, but overworked. By the time anyone could drive up here, whoever it was would be long gone. I kept an eye out when I could." Rebecca introduced Frank to Olivia, who had been listening from the doorway. The old man's demeanor softened as he spoke with the girl, asking about her interests and answering her questions about local wildlife. His knowledge was encyclopedic, suggesting a lifetime spent in these mountains. Before leaving, Frank scribbled his phone number on a scrap of paper. "Cell service is spotty up here, but there's a landline in the house that should work once you get it connected. If you need anything, supplies, a helping hand, or just company, give me a call." After Frank departed, Rebecca resumed work with renewed focus. The former sheriff's visit had confirmed her suspicions someone had been using the vacant property. But for what they worked until dusk, then packed up to return to the motel. As Rebecca locked the front door, she noticed Olivia staring up at the second-floor windows. "What are you looking at, sweetie?" Olivia pointed. "I thought I saw someone up there. A shadow moving." Rebecca immediately pulled her daughter back, scanning the darkened windows. Nothing moved behind the glass, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Stay here," she instructed, drawing her weapon. She re-entered the house, moving silently up the stairs, checking each room with the practiced efficiency of her FBI days. The second floor was empty, no signs of recent entry, but in the smallest bedroom, the one that would eventually be Olivia's, she found footprints in the dust that weren't theirs, larger than her own, with a distinctive tread pattern she photographed with her phone. The boots had a military-style lug sole with an unusual wear pattern on the outer edge, distinctive enough to identify if she encountered it again. Someone had been inside while they worked, moving carefully enough that neither of them had heard over the constant background noise of the waterfall. That night at the motel, Rebecca lay awake long after Olivia had fallen asleep. Her mind categorized facts identifying patterns and inconsistencies. The house's abnormally low price, the realtor's eagerness to close quickly, Frank's reports of lights at night, fresh footprints and tire tracks, new hardware amidst decay. Every instinct from her investigative days told her this house was more than just an abandoned property. It was connected to something, perhaps to the very case that had cost Michael his life. In the morning, she called Jessica Chen, a former colleague at the Bureau, who had remained loyal even after Rebecca's abrupt resignation. "Becca, it's been months. Are you okay?" Jessica's voice was warm with concern. "I'm fine. I've moved to Riverstone County with Olivia. Bought a house, actually." "That's surprising. Last time we talked, you said you'd never leave the city." Rebecca lowered her voice, though Olivia was in the shower. "I need a favor, Jess, off the record. Can you run a property check for me? Previous owners named Harmon, located on Cascade Mountain Road in Riverstone County." "This sounds suspiciously like an investigation. You're not licensed private now, are you?" "Just curious about my new home's history." Jessica sighed. "Give me a day or two. And Becca, be careful. Whatever you're poking at, remember you're not with the Bureau anymore. You don't have the resources or the backup." "I know. Thanks, Jess." Over the next 3 days, Rebecca established a routine. Mornings at the house working on critical repairs, afternoons in town purchasing supplies and materials. She hired an electrician to assess the wiring and a plumber for the most essential fixes, but took on much of the work herself. The physical labor felt good, scrubbing walls, replacing rotted boards, patching the roof. For the first time in years, she fell into bed exhausted from effort rather than grief. And Olivia was changing too, away from the cramped apartment in the school where she'd been labeled the girl whose father and brother died. She began to emerge from her shell. On the fourth day, Rebecca focused on the kitchen cabinets. One unit near the sink wobbled despite her efforts to secure it. Examining it more closely, she realized the cabinet wasn't properly attached to the wall. It had been deliberately mounted to allow movement. Carefully, she removed the dishes they'd stored there and pulled the cabinet away from the wall. Behind it was an unfinished section of wall, the wooden panels mismatched with the surrounding area. One board was slightly discolored compared to its neighbors, as if it had been replaced more recently. Rebecca ran her fingers along the edges, finding a slight gap where the panel met the wall. Using a flathead screwdriver, she gently pried at the edge. The board came loose with a soft crack, revealing a dark space behind. She reached for her flashlight, illuminating a small hollow in the wall. Inside sat a metal box wrapped in duct tape, its surface suspiciously clean compared to the dusty surroundings. She lifted it carefully, surprisingly heavy for its size, and set it on the kitchen counter. The knife from her pocket made quick work of the tape. Inside, her breath caught at the contents, several sealed plastic bags filled with white powder stacked neatly. Beneath them lay an old mobile phone with no SIM card, and at the bottom, a small metal dog tag with a name etched into its surface. Michael Stevens, agent number 7734. The date stamped below it was the day he died. The room seemed to tilt around her as she stared at the tag, her husband's name gleaming dully in the kitchen light. The man she had buried, the man she had loved and mourned, had been a dedicated FBI agent with an impeccable record. To see his name here connected to what was clearly a drug stash felt like a violation of everything she knew. But training overrode emotion. Her pulse steadied as her mind began to catalog possibilities. Someone had planted this recently, the clean box, the strategic placement. Someone had wanted her to find it, or perhaps to be found with it. The thought chilled her more than the mountain air. She heard Olivia's footsteps on the porch and quickly repacked the bong, sliding it into her backpack. The cabinet went back into place temporarily. Whatever this was, she wouldn't involve her daughter until she understood what they were dealing with. That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep. The metal tag felt heavy in her palm as she sat by the motel window, turning it over and over. The date of Michael's death stared back at her, a cruel reminder of the night that had shattered her family. She hadn't known details of his final case, classified, he'd told her, only that it involved a drug trafficking network with potential connections inside law enforcement. Weeks before the accident, he'd grown increasingly withdrawn, working late hours, taking encrypted calls in their garage where she couldn't overhear. The official report ruled his death an accident, Wet roads, a sharp turn taken too fast. But Michael had been a cautious driver, especially in bad weather. She'd questioned it at the time, but grief and the needs of a traumatized daughter had eventually pushed those doubts aside. Now they resurfaced with newfound clarity. This wasn't coincidence. The house behind the waterfall, the hidden drugs, Michael's ID tag, they were connected. But how the anonymous email that had led her to Riverstone County suddenly seemed suspicious as well. Had someone been guiding her here all along? At dawn, she dialed Frank Williams. "I need to ask you something about the Harmons," she said when he answered. "Did they have any connection to law enforcement?" A pause. "Not that I recall. Robert Harmon worked for a logging company." "Why do you ask?" "Just trying to understand the house's history. Did they leave any possessions behind when they disappeared?" "Bank cleared most of it out years ago. Whatever was left probably got taken by trespassers." Frank's voice lowered. "Rebecca, what's going on? You're asking questions like a cop, not a homeowner." "Just being thorough." She hesitated, then decided to trust her instincts about the former sheriff. "Frank, I was FBI until 6 years ago. My husband was 2 until he died in what was ruled an accident. I'm starting to think it wasn't." The silence stretched long enough that she wondered if the connection had dropped. "Come by my place this afternoon," he finally said. "There are some things we should discuss face to face." Frank's cabin sat in a clearing, surrounded by pine trees, an older but well-maintained structure with a wraparound porch. A German shepherd rose from the steps as Rebecca parked, barking once before Frank called it back. "That's Kaiser," the old man said as he welcomed her inside. "Best alarm system in the county." His home was simply furnished but comfortable, with framed photographs covering one wall. Frank in uniform, at different ages, standing beside colleagues, community members, and what appeared to be his family. "Coffee," he offered, already pouring a cup. Rebecca accepted, noting the precise way he moved around the kitchen, efficient, observant. The habits of a lifetime in law enforcement didn't fade with retirement. She also noticed the security system monitors partially hidden behind a bookshelf, showing camera feeds from multiple angles around the property. Frank hadn't mentioned this level of security, which suggested he had his own concerns. "Where's your daughter today?" "Library in town. The children's librarian offered to let her join their summer reading program." Rebecca took a sip of the strong black coffee. "You said we needed to talk." Frank nodded, retrieving an old album from a bookshelf. "Been thinking about your house since you called. Something's been nagging at me." He flipped through yellowed pages until he found what he sought. "Here. This was taken about 30 years ago at the opening of the Riverstone lumber mill." The photograph showed a group of men in suits cutting a ribbon. Frank's finger tapped one face in particular, a younger man with sharp features, standing slightly apart from the main group. "This is Victor Blackwell. He was a major investor in the mill, though he wasn't local. Came up from Atlanta maybe twice a year." Frank flipped to another page. And here he is again 5 years later at the town's centennial celebration. In this image, the same man stood beside a younger couple. The woman held a small child. "The Harmons," Rebecca guessed. Frank nodded. "Robert and Ellen Harmon with their son. They bought the waterfall property from Blackwell that same year. Got it for a steal from what I heard." "You think there's a connection between Blackwell and the Harmons' disappearance?" "I'm not saying anything definite." Frank closed the album. "But about 6 months before the Harmons vanished, Blackwell started showing up more frequently. I'd see his car heading up that mountain road several times a month. Then the Harmons disappeared and Blackwell stopped coming around altogether." Rebecca's mind raced with implications. "Have you seen him, Hatzbaum?" "Not in person, but I recognized him on the news a few years back. He'd started some private security firm in Atlanta. Very successful from the sound of it." Rebecca set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "What's the name of his company?" "Sentinel Security Solutions. Made a fortune with government contracts." Frank studied her expression. "Why does that mean something to you?" It did. Victor Blackwell had been Michael's partner at the FBI before abruptly resigning to start his private firm. Michael had never trusted the man, calling him too polished, too connected. A month after Blackwell left the bureau, Michael died. "I need to see everything you have on the Harmons and Blackwell," Rebecca said. "Newspaper clippings, records, anything." Frank raised an eyebrow, but asked no questions as he retrieved a box from his office. For the next 2 hours, they pored over local history, property records, news articles, old police reports. A pattern emerged. Blackwell had purchased several properties in the county during the lumber boom, selling most of them except the Waterfall House, which went to the Harmons under unusual terms. The deed has a buyback clause, Frank noted, pointing to fine print. Blackwell could repurchase the property at the original sale price within 20 years. But he never did, even after they disappeared. Nope, bank foreclosed, and it sat in limbo until you came along. As the afternoon waned, Rebecca gathered the most relevant documents to study later. Frank walked her to her car, Kaiser padding alongside them. "Rebecca," he said as she opened the driver's door, "I've been in law enforcement long enough to recognize when someone's investigating, not just asking casual questions. Whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. This mountain has a way of keeping secrets." She nodded, appreciating his discretion. "I will. And Frank, don't mention our conversation to anyone, especially Carson Reed. Wouldn't dream of it." He scratched the dog's ears. "But you'll let me know if you need backup. Old habits die hard." For the first time in days, Rebecca smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." That evening, after picking up Olivia from the library, Rebecca received a text from Jessica. "Info on property sent to your secure email. Call me." Once Olivia was asleep, Rebecca opened her laptop and accessed the encrypted email account she'd maintained since leaving the bureau. Jessica's message was brief but alarming. Property changed hands multiple times through shell companies before Harmons purchased it. One company traces back to Victor Blackwell. More concerning, Blackwell was under internal investigation when he resigned. Files sealed. Michael was the lead investigator. Watch your back. Attached were property records, corporate filings, and a single redacted page from an FBI case file with Michael's name as the reporting agent. The case number matched one Rebecca had seen him working on during those final weeks. She closed the laptop, slowly, pieces falling into place. Michael hadn't died in a random accident. He had been investigating. Victor perhaps discovered something connected to the Waterfall House and paid with his life. Now, 6 years later, she had unknowingly walked into the same web. The white powder in those bags was almost certainly drugs, perhaps evidence that had supposedly been destroyed, but had instead been hidden. The phone might contain communications contacts. And Michael's ID tag, that was a message. Someone wanted her to know this was connected to him. Rebecca moved to the window, gazing out at the darkened parking lot. Was she being watched even now? The motel was the only accommodation for miles. Anyone looking for her would know she was staying here. She checked her gun, placing it under her pillow, and wedged a chair beneath the doorknob. Tomorrow they would return to the house, but with a different purpose. She would no longer be just cleaning and repairing. She would be hunting for answers. Morning brought heavy fog that clung to the mountainside as they drove up the winding road. Olivia was unusually quiet, sensing the shift in her mother's demeanor. "Are we still going to live there?" she finally asked as the house came into view through the mist. Rebecca chose her words carefully. "That's still the plan, but I need to make sure it's safe first. There might be structural issues I didn't notice before." At the house, Rebecca gave Olivia specific tasks in the main living area while she methodically examined every inch of the kitchen. Using tools from her FBI days that she'd kept in storage, she checked for hidden compartments, false walls, anything that might conceal additional evidence. The cabinet hiding space yielded nothing new, but behind the refrigerator, she discovered a small hole drilled through the exterior wall, perfect for running wires. Someone had set up surveillance equipment at some point. Rebecca examined it with a microfiber probe light, finding traces of adhesive residue where a camera or microphone had likely been mounted. Moving to the basement, she found more subtle signs, scuff marks on the concrete floor in a distinct pattern, as if heavy objects had been repeatedly placed in the same spots. Near the back wall, faint chemical residue suggested something had been spilled and hastily cleaned up. She took samples with sterile swabs from her kit, sealing them in evidence bags. Most telling was the hidden access panel she discovered behind a stack of old lumber. It led to a narrow passage that appeared to extend into the rock face itself. Too dangerous to explore without proper equipment, but its existence confirmed her growing suspicion this house had served as more than just a residence. As Rebecca climbed the basement stairs, she heard Olivia call out from above. "Mom, I found something weird." She hurried up to find her daughter in the small room they designated as a future office. Olivia pointed to a floorboard that didn't quite match the others. "It moves when you step on it." she demonstrated, pressing her foot down. The board shifted slightly. Good eye, sweetie. Rebecca knelt to examine it. Using a pocket knife, she carefully pried up the board, revealing a narrow space beneath. No hidden treasures this time, but the cavity wasn't empty. A folded piece of paper had been tucked inside. She extracted it carefully. It was a hand-drawn map of the property with X marks at various locations around the house and notes in cramped handwriting. Most interesting was a dotted line showing what appeared to be a tunnel leading from the basement to a point behind the waterfall. "What is it?" Olivia asked, peering over her shoulder. "Just an old property map, probably left by previous owners." Rebecca folded it quickly and tucked it into her pocket. "Let's take a break for lunch." They ate sandwiches on the small porch, the constant roar of the waterfall providing background noise that would mask any conversation from potential listening devices. Rebecca kept her voice casual as she asked, "Olivia, would you like to stay with Grandma Jenkins for a few days? I could drive you down tomorrow." Her daughter looked up sharply. "Why is something wrong with the house?" "No, nothing's wrong, but some of the repairs I need to do might be dangerous electrical work, some structural fixes. You'd be more comfortable at Grandma's and I could work faster." Olivia's eyes narrowed with a perceptiveness beyond her 12 years. "You're not telling me something. Is this about Dad? You've been different ever since you found whatever was in that wall." Rebecca felt a stab of guilt. She'd tried to shield Olivia from her suspicions, but clearly hadn't been as subtle as she thought. "This house, it might be connected to Dad's work somehow. I'm not sure yet. His last case, the one he couldn't talk about." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Possibly, which is why I'd feel better if you stayed with Grandma while I figure things out." "But what if whoever put that thing in the wall comes back?" "That's exactly why I want you somewhere safe." Olivia set down her sandwich, face suddenly resolute. "No, I'm staying with you. We're a team, remember? You promised after Dad and Ethan died, no more secrets, no more being left behind." The memory hit hard. In the hospital waiting room, holding Olivia's small hands in hers, making that vow through tears. No more secrets. No more leaving her in the dark the way Michael sometimes had with his classified work. "Okay," Rebecca conceded, "but you follow my instructions exactly. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Olivia nodded solemnly. "What did you find in the wall?" Rebecca hesitated, then decided honesty was the safer approach. A box with drugs, an old phone, and a metal tag with Dad's name on it. Her daughter's eyes widened. "Someone's trying to say Dad was involved with drugs. That's ridiculous. Dad would never." "I know, sweetie. Someone's trying to set up a false narrative. The question is why, after all these years?" Rebecca squeezed Olivia's hand. "Your father was investigating something big before he died. I think he discovered something here at this house. And I think someone wants to make sure that if I find it too, I'll be discredited, just another grieving widow imagining conspiracies." "What are we going to do?" "First, we're going to be very, very careful. Second, I'm going to set up some security of my own." Rebecca glanced toward the tree line where the property met the forest. "And third, we're going to find out what your father discovered and who was willing to kill to keep it secret." That night at the motel, Rebecca spread the documents from Frank across the small desk, cross-referencing them with Jessica's information. She created a timeline on her laptop tracking Victor Blackwell's movements, property acquisitions, and connections to both the Harmons and the FBI. A pattern emerged. Blackwell had established his security firm with surprising speed after leaving the bureau, securing major contracts almost immediately. His company specialized in evidence management solutions for law enforcement agencies, providing secure storage for seized assets including drugs, weapons, and cash. The timing aligned perfectly. Michael's final case had involved missing evidence, drugs seized in raids that somehow vanished before trial. He'd suspected an inside operation, someone with access and authorization diverting seizures before they were officially logged. Rebecca pulled up old news articles about major drug busts in the region. 3 significant operations occurred in the months before Michael's death, with combined seizures valued at millions. In each case, the evidence was processed through channels where Blackwell's company had contracts. The house behind the waterfall would have been the perfect temporary holding location, remote, difficult to access with natural sound masking from the water. The Harmons might have been paid to look the other way, or perhaps they discovered what was happening and paid the price for that knowledge. As midnight approached, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Emergency, call secure line immediately." She dialed the number from memory, heart racing. "Becca, listen carefully." Jessica's voice was tight with urgency. "Someone flagged my searches on Blackwell and the property. Internal Affairs pulled me in for questioning this afternoon." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing about you. Said I was following up on old cases for closure, but they didn't buy it." A pause. "Victor Blackwell called me personally an hour ago, asked about you directly, wanted to know if we were still in contact." Cold dread pooled in Rebecca's stomach. "What did you say?" "That we hadn't spoken in years, but Becca, he knows. Somehow he knows you're looking into him." Keys clicked in the background. "There's more." I dug deeper after the questioning. "Blackwell's company just got a massive new contract with the DEA, $50 million for evidence management. The approval came from someone high up, someone who used to work cases with Michael." "Who?" "Assistant Director Lawrence." Jessica's voice dropped further. "The same person who signed off on the accident report for Michael's crash." Rebecca closed her eyes, pieces falling into place. "A cover-up from the beginning. Whatever you've stumbled into, it goes higher than Blackwell. Be careful." "I will. And Jess, thank you. Now delete these calls and forget we spoke. Protect yourself." After hanging up, Rebecca checked on Olivia, then moved to the window, scanning the parking lot. A black SUV she hadn't noticed before was parked in the far corner, its windows tinted. As she watched, the driver's door open slightly, just enough for her to glimpse a man speaking into a radio. They were being watched. She packed efficiently, waking Olivia with a gentle hand over her mouth to signal quiet. "We need to leave," she whispered. "Someone's outside. Get dressed quickly, just essentials." Within minutes, they slipped out the bathroom window into the service area behind the motel. Rebecca led Olivia through the dark to where the motel owner's pickup truck sat, unlocked, keys hidden above the visor, a small-town habit she'd noticed earlier. "We're borrowing this," she explained as she helped Olivia into the passenger seat. "I'll make sure it gets returned." They drove without headlights until reaching the main road, then headed not toward their house but in the opposite direction, deeper into the mountains. Rebecca knew they couldn't return to the motel, and the house would be the first place Blackwell's men would look. "Where are we going?" Olivia asked, her voice small in the darkness. "Frank Williams' place. He'll help us." The old sheriff was awake despite the late hour, Kaiser alerting him before they reached the porch. He took one look at their faces and ushered them inside without questions. "Back bedroom's made up," he said, locking the door behind them. "You're safe here for tonight." Once Olivia was settled in the spare room, Rebecca explained the situation to Frank in hushed tones. The former sheriff listened without interruption, his weathered face growing grimmer with each detail. "I never trusted Blackwell," he said when she finished. "Too smooth, too quick, with favors and donations whenever the county needed something. But drug trafficking, through evidence channels, that's a whole other level." "It explains the Harmon's disappearance," Rebecca noted. "Either they were involved and relocated when things got hot, or they discovered what was happening and were eliminated." Frank nodded slowly. "And your husband stumbled onto it all." "The question is, what did Michael find that was worth killing him over? Something specific must have triggered their response." Rebecca rubbed her temples. "And why plant evidence now after all these years? Why lure me to that house?" "Because something's still there," Frank said simply. "Something they need to recover or ensure stays hidden." He rose, checking the windows before continuing. "The timing's suspicious, too. This massive contract Blackwell's company just landed, maybe they're cleaning house before expanding operations." Rebecca considered this. "We need to search the house properly. Not just cleaning and repairs, but a systematic sweep. Whatever Michael found, it's our best chance at exposing them." "You can't go back there now," Frank cautioned. "They'll be watching." "We don't have a choice." Rebecca's voice hardened. "Michael died trying to expose this. I won't let his killers walk away clean, not when we're this close." Frank studied her, then nodded once. "All right, but you're not going alone, and we'll need a plan." They spent the next hour strategizing. Frank's knowledge of the mountain terrain provided alternative approaches to the property. They would go tomorrow at dawn using the morning fog as cover. Frank would create a diversion to draw off any watchers, while Rebecca accessed the house through the tunnel entrance shown on the map. As they finalized details, Rebecca felt a strange calm settle over her. 6 years of grief and uncertainty were crystallizing into purpose. Whatever awaited at the house behind the waterfall, she would face it for Michael, for Ethan, and for the truth that had been buried for too long. In the bedroom, she found Olivia still awake, staring at the ceiling. "Everything okay?" Rebecca asked, sitting beside her on the bed. "I was thinking about Ethan," Olivia said softly. "How he always wanted to live behind a waterfall. It's weird that we found exactly that place, isn't it? Almost like he knew somehow." Rebecca brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Life has strange patterns sometimes. Do you think Dad knew about the house? Is that why Ethan talked about it?" The question struck Rebecca forcefully. Michael had taken the family hiking in these mountains multiple times. Had he been scouting locations? Was the waterfall house already on his radar back then? "It's possible," she admitted. "Your father was investigating something big. Maybe he'd already identified this location as significant." Olivia was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are we in danger, Mom?" Rebecca considered lying, then remembered her promise. "No more secrets." "Yes, but we're also close to answers, and I won't let anything happen to you." "I know." Olivia's hand found hers in the darkness. "Dad used to say you were the strongest person he knew, that when you decided on something, nothing could stop you." The words brought unexpected tears to Rebecca's eyes. "Try to sleep, sweetie. Tomorrow will be challenging." As Olivia drifted off, Rebecca sat beside her, watching shadows play across the wall. Outside, the mountain night was alive with sounds, wind in the pines, an owl's distant call, the rustling of nocturnal creatures. Behind it all, she could almost hear the constant roar of the waterfall calling her back to the house that held secrets worth killing for. Ethan had been right about one thing: behind the water, the noise of the world faded away. But he couldn't have known that sometimes that same isolation made the perfect cover for darkness. Dawn would bring them back to the waterfall house, not as new owners excited about renovations, but as hunters tracking a predator who had eluded justice for far too long. Rebecca checked her weapon one last time before closing her eyes. Michael's metal ID tag, cool against her skin, where she'd hung it around her neck. Whatever waited behind the waterfall, she was ready. Morning fog shrouded the mountain like a protective cloak, turning the forest into a maze of ghostly silhouettes. Frank's truck crept along the narrow service road, headlights off, tires crunching softly on pine needles and gravel. Rebecca checked her watch, 5:17 a.m. First light was just beginning to penetrate the mist, casting everything in a pale, diffuse glow. "This old logging path circles around behind the property," Frank whispered, navigating by memory more than sight. "Hasn't been used in decades, but it'll get us within a quarter-mile of the waterfall. From there, we follow the creek up." In the back seat, Olivia sat silently, bundled in a fleece jacket too large for her frame, one of Frank's. Against Rebecca's initial judgment, they'd agreed to bring her along. Leaving her alone at Frank's cabin seemed more dangerous than keeping her close, especially with Blackwell's men searching the area. The truck jolted to a stop at a fallen tree blocking the path. Frank killed the engine and gestured toward the forest. "End of the line. We go on foot from here." Rebecca shouldered her backpack containing essentials, flashlights, water, a first aid kit, and tools for both breaking and entering and self-defense. Her Glock was secured in a holster at her hip, a reassuring weight. Frank carried an old hunting rifle and a canvas bag of supplies. Olivia clutched a small pack with her own water bottle and emergency items. They moved silently through the undergrowth, Frank leading the way with the confidence of someone who had patrolled these woods for decades. The sound of rushing water grew steadily louder, a constant background noise that would mask their approach. "Remember the plan," Rebecca breathed as they paused at the creek's edge. "Frank creates a diversion at the front of the property, while Olivia and I access the tunnel entrance. We have 30 minutes to search the house before retreating to the rendezvous point." Frank nodded, checking his watch. "If I'm not at the meeting spot by 7:30, don't wait. Take my truck keys and get Olivia to safety." The path alongside the creek grew steeper as they climbed the terrain, more treacherous, with slick rocks and exposed roots. Olivia stumbled once, but caught herself, determined to keep pace. The waterfall's roar intensified as they approached from behind, climbing the rocky slope that formed the cliff face. Finally, they reached a vantage point where they could see the house through gaps in the trees. It sat quiet and seemingly abandoned, no vehicles visible near the bridge. But Rebecca knew appearances could be deceiving. She pulled out compact binoculars and scanned methodically. There a glint of metal in the trees about 50 yards from the house. And again, Near the road, a man in a dark jacket, partially concealed behind a boulder, the outline of a rifle just visible. "Two watchers that I can see," she whispered. "One at the tree line east of the house, another covering the approach road." Frank took the binoculars, confirming her assessment. "Professional setup. They're expecting us to come up the main road." Rebecca unfolded the property map they had found under the floorboard, tracing the dotted line that indicated the tunnel. According to the drawing, the entrance was hidden behind a rock formation that resembled a crouching bear, a landmark they'd spotted during their climb. "It's time to separate," she said, checking her watch. "Frank, give us 15 minutes to reach the tunnel entrance, then start your diversion." The old sheriff gripped her shoulder briefly, his blue eyes serious beneath bushy white brows. "Be careful in there. These men aren't local troublemakers. They're killers protecting millions in illegal operations. They won't hesitate." "I know, we'll be quick." She turned to Olivia, who stood straight-backed, despite the fear evident in her eyes. "Stay close to me at all times. If I tell you to run, you follow the creek back down to where we left the trail markers. Understand?" Olivia nodded solemnly. "I can do this, Mom." Rebecca and Olivia moved quietly through the dense vegetation, circling wide around the property to approach the bear rock formation from behind. The moss-covered stone did indeed resemble a bear. When viewed from the right angle, its head lowered, as if drinking from the small spring that bubbled beneath it. Following the map's instructions, Rebecca searched the rock face behind the formation. Near the ground, partially obscured by ferns, she found a metal grate covered with artificial stone, designed to blend perfectly with the surroundings. Only someone specifically looking for it would ever notice the seam. The grate was secured with a padlock newer than the surrounding mechanism. Rebecca removed thin metal tools from her pocket, the lock-picking set she'd kept from her FBI training. Within minutes, the lock clicked open. "Impressive," Olivia whispered, a hint of pride in her voice. "Let's hope the rest is this easy." Rebecca pulled the grate open, revealing a dark tunnel sloping gently downward. She switched on her flashlight, illuminating rough-hewn stone walls reinforced with timber supports. "Stay behind me, hand on my belt at all times." The tunnel was narrow but tall enough for them to walk upright. The air inside felt surprisingly fresh, suggesting some ventilation system. Water dripped from the ceiling in places, and their footsteps echoed despite their attempts at silence. After about 50 yards, the passage widened into a small chamber with 3 branches. Rebecca consulted the map again, identifying the middle path as leading toward the house. The tunnel began to slope upward, the floor changing from stone to packed earth with wooden slats. A distant explosion shattered the silence. Frank's diversion had begun. Rebecca quickened their pace, knowing the watchers would be distracted, but not for long. The tunnel ended at a solid wooden door reinforced with metal bands. Another padlock, this one showing signs of frequent use. Rebecca made quick work of it and eased the door open, wincing at the slight creak of hinges. They emerged into a basement larger than what she'd seen during her previous exploration of the house. This section had been concealed behind a false wall, accessible only through the tunnel. Unlike the dusty, cluttered main basement, this space was organized with industrial shelving, a generator, and what appeared to be a sophisticated ventilation system. "What is this place?" Olivia's voice was barely audible. "A staging area," Rebecca replied, scanning the room with her flashlight, "for moving product in and out undetected." Most shelves stood empty, but marks in the dust showed where items had recently been removed. In one corner stood a metal desk with a filing cabinet beside it. Rebecca headed straight for it, trying drawers that proved to be locked. Another explosion, more distant than the first, followed by what sounded like gunshots. Frank was putting on quite a show, but it meant their window was shrinking rapidly. Rebecca used her tools on the desk drawer, revealing a stack of ledgers inside. She quickly photographed pages with her phone: shipment, dates, quantities, locations. Names had been reduced to initials, but one appeared repeatedly: VB. The filing cabinet yielded more treasure folders containing photographs of men in law enforcement uniforms receiving packages at various locations. One photo showed Victor Blackwell himself shaking hands with a uniformed police captain outside a Sentinel Security Solutions warehouse. Rebecca's pulse quickened when she found a folder labeled MS. Inside were surveillance photos of Michaels, some taken near their old home, others near FBI headquarters. The final image showed Michael's car on the mountain road the night he died, captured by what must have been a hidden camera. They were watching him. She breathed anger burning cold and sharp. They knew it, he was onto them. A floorboard creaked overhead. Someone was in the house. Rebecca quickly gathered the most critical documents, stuffing them into her backpack. The ledgers and photographs would provide solid evidence of the operation, evidence that might finally bring Michael's killers to justice. "We need to move," she whispered, guiding Olivia back toward the tunnel entrance. "Frank's diversion worked, but we don't have much time." Before they could reach the door, footsteps descended the main basement stairs. Rebecca doused her flashlight, pulling Olivia behind a shelving unit. Through the gaps, she could see a beam of light sweeping the main basement area. "Check everything," a man's voice ordered. "They've been in here before, might have found something." Two men moved methodically through the open basement, flashlights illuminating every corner. They hadn't yet discovered the false wall, but it was only a matter of time. Rebecca weighed their options. The tunnel offered escape, but opening the concealed door now would immediately reveal their position. The main stairs led up to the house, likely with more of Blackwell's men waiting. They were trapped. Her gaze fell on the ventilation system, large metal ducts that ran along the ceiling, presumably connecting to the outside. An idea formed. "Follow me," she mouthed to Olivia, creeping toward the generator. With practiced movements, she located the fuel line and loosened it slightly, allowing gasoline to leak onto the concrete floor. The sharp smell would soon attract attention. Next, she guided Olivia to a metal duct near the back wall, large enough for them to crawl through. Using a multi-tool from her pocket, she quietly unscrewed the access panel. "Get in," she instructed Olivia. "Crawl forward until you find an opening. Wait for me there." Olivia hesitated only briefly before pulling herself into the duct, moving with surprising agility. Rebecca followed, replacing the panel behind them as best she could from the inside. The metal duct was cold and confined, barely wide enough for Rebecca's shoulders. They crawled slowly, trying to minimize noise as the voices in the basement grew more agitated. "You smell that gas leak? Shit the generator. Someone's been in here." Rebecca kept moving, following Olivia through the dark, cramped passage. The duct branched several times. They chose paths that seemed to lead upward and outward. After what felt like an eternity of silent crawling, Olivia stopped at a grate through which daylight filtered. Below them was a small room they hadn't seen before, for what appeared to be a storage closet on the first floor. It was empty, the door closed. Rebecca carefully pushed against the grate, finding it loose enough to remove. They lowered themselves into the closet, Rebecca replacing the vent cover to hide their route. Pressing her ear to the door, she listened for movement outside. Footsteps pounded on distant floorboards. Voices shouted instructions. The diversion in the basement had created chaos, but also put everyone on high alert. Rebecca checked her watch, 6:45 a.m. They had less than an hour to reach the rendezvous point. "New plan," she whispered to Olivia. "The house is too hot. We need to get out now." She eased the closet door open a crack, peering into what appeared to be a narrow hallway connecting the kitchen to the living room. Two men were visible through the doorway to the main room, their backs to the hallway as they peered out windows. "When I say go, we move silently to the kitchen and out the back door. Stay in my footsteps exactly." Olivia nodded, face pale but determined. Rebecca counted down with her fingers, 3, 2, 1. They slipped into the hallway, hugging the wall, stepping precisely where Rebecca indicated to avoid the creaky floorboards she'd noted during their cleaning days. The kitchen doorway loomed ahead, mercifully empty. A shout from the basement sent the men in the living room running. Rebecca seized the opportunity, pulling Olivia into the kitchen and toward the back door. The door was locked, not with the simple deadbolt she remembered, but with a new electronic keypad. Someone had upgraded the security, anticipating their return. "Mom!" Fear crept into Olivia's whisper as the voices approached from the basement stairwell. Rebecca's mind raced. Breaking the door would alert everyone. The windows were too small for a quick escape. She glanced around desperately, gaze landing on the wobbling cabinet that had concealed the first hiding place. "In here," she breathed, pulling Olivia toward it. With practiced movements, she removed the items inside, pulled the cabinet forward just enough, and helped Olivia squeeze into the space between it and the wall. Rebecca followed carefully, sliding the cabinet back into position from the inside. Footsteps entered the kitchen, heavy boots on hardwood. "Upstairs is clear," a man reported. "No sign of entry." "They're here somewhere," another voice responded, deeper, more authoritative. "The gas line didn't loosen itself. Search every inch." Rebecca held Olivia close in the cramped space, feeling her daughter's heart pounding against her chest. The hollow behind the cabinet connected to the wall cavity where she'd found the metal box days earlier. She reached into the space, fingers brushing against something new, a small plastic object attached to the inner wall. A listening device, recently planted based on its clean surface. Someone had been monitoring the house, perhaps even recording their earlier conversations during the cleaning process. Keeping perfectly still, Rebecca's mind shifted to their predicament. The men would eventually search behind the cabinets, especially this one with its known hidden compartment. They needed another way out, and quickly. She felt along the back wall of the cavity, discovering that one section felt different, newer plasterboard, less textured than the surrounding material. Pressing carefully, she felt it give slightly. The boots moved closer, opening cabinets, checking under the sink. Any noise now would give away their position. Inch by inch, Rebecca applied pressure to the newer section of wall. It shifted inward, revealing darkness beyond. She guided Olivia through first, then squeezed through herself, pulling the false section closed behind them. They found themselves in a narrow space between walls barely wide enough to move sideways. Rebecca used her phone's light on its lowest setting, revealing a crude ladder leading upward through the house's framework. "Climb," she mouthed to Olivia, pointing up. Slowly. They ascended in silence while voices continued searching the kitchen. The ladder led to the second floor, ending at another removable panel that opened into a linen closet. Rebecca listened at the closet door, hearing distant voices, but nothing nearby. She eased the door open, finding themselves in the upstairs hallway. The windows at the end showed the waterfall sunlight now breaking through the morning fog to create rainbows in the mist. A crash from downstairs. Someone had found the tunnel entrance. Shouts echoed through the house as Rebecca led Olivia toward the smallest bedroom, the one that would have been hers. Unlike the other rooms with windows facing front, this one had a single window overlooking the side of the property, partially concealed by the waterfall's spray. Rebecca locked the door behind them, knowing it wouldn't hold for long if someone came searching. She moved to the window, checking the drop about 15 feet to a narrow ledge that ran alongside the house, slick with moisture from the waterfall's constant spray. "We're going to climb out," she told Olivia, keeping her voice steady despite the urgency. "The ledge leads around to the back of the waterfall. From there, we can reach the creek and circle back to meet Frank." Olivia stared at the narrow ledge, visibly swallowing her fear. "I can do it." Rebecca opened the window, carefully wincing at the slight squeal of old hinges. She helped Olivia out, first holding tightly to her arms until the girl's feet found purchase on the wet stone. Then she followed, closing the window behind them. The ledge was treacherously narrow, barely wide enough for their feet. Rebecca kept one hand against the house wall, the other holding Olivia's shoulder ahead of her. They inched sideways, the waterfall's roar growing louder as they approached the back of the house. The ledge widened slightly as it curved around the house's rear corner where the structure met the cliff face. Here the waterfall's edge was just feet away, its thundering curtain creating a constant spray that soaked them within seconds. Through the veil of water, Rebecca could see the creek below and the path they'd taken up. No sign of Blackwell's men outside yet, but that wouldn't last. They needed to reach the creek bed and follow it downstream to the rendezvous point. "We need to climb down," Rebecca instructed, pointing to natural handholds in the rock face. "Go slowly, test each hold before putting your weight on it." They began their descent, the wet rock making every move precarious. Halfway down, Olivia's foot slipped, sending a small cascade of pebbles clattering to the creek bed below. Rebecca caught her daughter's arms, stabilizing her. "I've got you," she assured her. "Just a little further." A shout from above. Someone at the bedroom window had spotted them. Rebecca looked up to see a man leaning out, speaking into a radio. No weapon visible yet, but that would change quickly. "Hurry but careful," she urged Olivia, who increased her pace with newfound determination. They reached the creek bed as the first shot rang out, bullet striking stone inches from Rebecca's head. She pulled Olivia behind a large boulder, shielding her as more shots followed, pinging off rocks and sending up sprays of water. "Stay low, follow the creek," Rebecca instructed, removing her gun from its holster. "I'll cover you." They moved downstream in a crouch, using the creek's rocky banks as cover. Rebecca fired twice toward the window, not aiming to hit, but to force their pursuer back inside. It bought them precious seconds to put distance between themselves and the house. The creek bent sharply around a hill, temporarily blocking them from view. Rebecca used the opportunity to pull Olivia into the underbrush away from the water. They'll expect us to follow the creek, she explained. We'll cut through the forest instead. Forest terrain would normally slow them down, but Rebecca's study of the area maps had revealed an old game trail that roughly paralleled their intended route. They found it after a few minutes of careful searching a narrow path barely visible among the ferns and pine needles. Behind them, shouts echoed as men poured from the house, spreading out to search the property. A dog barked they'd brought tracking animals, complicating the escape plan significantly. Rebecca's mind raced through options. The rendezvous point was still a mile away. With dogs on their trail, they'd never make it without being caught. They needed to mask their scent. The trail dipped toward a small tributary stream. Rebecca guided Olivia into the shallow water, following it upstream away from their actual destination. Cold water numbed their feet as they walked carefully over slippery stones, leaving no footprints. After 100 yards, Rebecca spotted what she needed: a fallen tree, creating a natural bridge across the stream. They climbed onto it, crossed, and dropped down onto a rocky outcropping that would leave minimal scent for the dogs. From there, they cut directly through the densest part of the forest, moving as quickly as silence permitted. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, suggesting their backtracking had worked at least temporarily. The terrain grew steeper as they approached a ridge that separated the waterfall property from the valley beyond. Rebecca checked her watch. 7:15. They had 15 minutes to reach the rendezvous point. Olivia stumbled, exhaustion beginning to show. Rebecca caught her arm, steadying her. Just a little further, over this ridge then, down to the old fire road. Frank will be waiting. They crested the ridge, ducking low to avoid being silhouetted against the sky. Below, the forest opened into a small meadow where the old fire road cut through, now overgrown with grass. No sign of Frank or his truck. Rebecca scanned the area through her binoculars, searching for movement. Nothing. She checked her watch again. 7:23. Let's get down there, she whispered to Olivia. Stay in the tree line until we confirm it's safe. They descended carefully, using trees for handholds on the steep slope. As they neared the bottom, Rebecca froze, spotting movement near the far end of the meadow. Not Frank. Two men in dark clothing, moving methodically along the fire road. Blackwell's men had anticipated the escape route. They were being hunted from multiple directions now. Change of plan, Rebecca breathed, pulling Olivia back into denser cover. We need to circle around, approach the rendezvous from the other direction. A gunshot echoed from somewhere behind them, followed by another, not aimed at them, but part of a distant exchange. Rebecca's stomach tightened. Frank might be in trouble. They worked their way around the meadow's edge, keeping to the shadows. The forest here was old growth, massive trunks providing cover as they moved. Rebecca's ears strained for any sound that might indicate Frank's position or the direction of the gunfire. A bird call, 3 short whistles followed by a longer one, cut through the forest sounds. Rebecca recognized it immediately as the signal Frank had taught them. He was alive and nearby. She responded with the same pattern, keeping her whistle soft enough to avoid attracting unwanted attention. A minute later, Frank appeared from behind a massive fallen tree, his rifle in hand, a bloody scrape across his forehead. Ran into some resistance, he explained in a whisper, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. 2-man team professional. I led them away from the road, but they'll figure it out soon. The truck, Rebecca asked. Half-mile that way. Frank pointed east, away from the meadow, hidden under branches. But we need to move quickly. The woods are crawling with Blackwell's men. They set off immediately, Frank leading the way with the confidence of someone who knew every tree and rock in these mountains. Olivia kept pace between them, drawing on hidden reserves of strength. A dog barked in the distance, closer than comfortable. The animals had picked up their scent despite the precautions. Water again, Frank directed, guiding them toward another small stream. Dogs lose effectiveness with multiple water crossings. They waded through the shallow water for several hundred yards, the cold numbing their already tired legs. When they finally emerged, Frank led them up a nearly invisible game trail that zigzagged up a steep embankment. At the top, the forest thinned slightly, allowing them to move faster. The sounds of pursuit faded, but Rebecca knew it was temporary. Professional trackers wouldn't give up so easily, especially with dogs. Frank suddenly raised his hand, signaling a stop. He dropped to one knee, listening intently. Rebecca followed suit, pulling Olivia down beside her, voices ahead, faint but drawing closer. Frank pointed left, indicating a detour. They crawled through underbrush thorns, snagging clothing and scratching exposed skin. The voices grew louder, at least three men discussing search patterns. They can't have gone far, one said voice carrying in the morning air. The woman and kid were seen at the house less than an hour ago. Blackwell wants them alive, another replied. Especially the woman. She has something he needs. The third voice chuckled coldly. Alive doesn't mean unharmed, just breathing. Rebecca's hand tightened on her gun. These weren't just security personnel, they were killers comfortable with inflicting pain. The stakes had escalated beyond recovering evidence or protecting an operation. This was personal now. They remained motionless until the voices faded, then continued their circuitous route toward the hidden truck. Frank moved with surprising agility for his age, but Rebecca noticed him wincing, occasionally favoring his left side. You're hurt, she whispered as they paused for breath. Frank shook his head dismissively. Caught some buckshot when they ambushed me. Nothing serious. Let me see. Rebecca didn't wait for permission, lifting his jacket to reveal a blood-stained shirt beneath. Several pellets had penetrated his side, none deep enough to be life-threatening but collectively serious. You need medical attention. Later, Frank insisted. Truck first, then we get to safety. I know a place they won't think to look. They pushed on the terrain, growing familiar as they approached the old logging road where Frank had hidden the vehicle. Rebecca's muscles ached from the constant tension and exertion, but adrenaline kept her moving. Finally, they spotted it. Frank's blue pickup concealed beneath cut branches and forest debris. The old sheriff moved ahead to clear the camouflage, while Rebecca kept watch. Olivia pressed close to her side. The distant bark of dogs had returned closer now. They'd picked up the trail again. We need to move, Rebecca urged, as Frank uncovered the truck. Get in, he replied, tossing her the keys. You drive. I'll ride in back with the rifle cover our exit if needed. Rebecca helped Olivia into the passenger seat, then slid behind the wheel. Frank positioned himself in the truck bed, rifle ready, as she started the engine. Its rumble seemed impossibly loud in the forest quiet. She reversed onto the logging road, then accelerated as much as the rough terrain allowed. Behind them, Frank kept his weapon trained on the forest edge. The truck bounced violently over roots and ruts, forcing Rebecca to grip the wheel with both hands. Olivia braced herself against the dashboard, face set in determination despite her exhaustion. They'd traveled perhaps a quarter-mile when gunshots erupted behind them. Frank returned fire, his rifle's report sharp and definitive compared to the pursuer's weapons. Faster, he shouted, ducking as bullets pinged off the truck's metal body. Rebecca pressed the accelerator to the floor, the old truck protesting as it bounced over increasingly rough terrain. A bullet shattered the rear window, showering the cab with safety glass. Olivia screamed, covering her head. Stay down, Rebecca ordered, hunching low while still maintaining control of the vehicle. The logging road curved sharply ahead, momentarily shielding them from direct fire. Rebecca checked the rear-view mirror, seeing Frank reloading his rifle, blood now visibly soaking through his shirt. Hang on, Frank, she muttered. Just a little further. They rounded another bend, the road widening as it approached the intersection with a more established Forest Service route. If they could reach it, the improved surface would allow greater speed. A figure suddenly appeared in the road ahead, a man in tactical gear, rifle raised. Rebecca swerved hard to the truck, fishtailing on loose gravel. The man fired bullets, striking the hood and front tire. The steering wheel jerked in Rebecca's hands as the tire blew. She fought for control as the truck slewed sideways, finally skidding to a stop at the road's edge. The engine stalled, silence descending except for the ping of the overheated radiator and the distant shouts of approaching men. Out, Rebecca commanded, grabbing her backpack with the evidence. Into the trees now. Olivia scrambled from the passenger side as Rebecca drew her weapon. Frank had already dropped from the truck bed, rifle at the ready despite the growing bloodstain on his side. Go with Olivia, he instructed Rebecca, voice steady despite his pallor. I'll hold them here. We're not separating, Rebecca insisted, moving to support him as his legs threatened to buckle. Not a discussion. Frank's eyes held a resolve she recognized from her own mirror, the look of someone prepared to make a final stand. I'm hit worse than I let on. Would only slow you down. He pressed a folded map into her hand. My cabin's marked. Hidden cellar beneath the woodshed. Go there. Contact you-know-who. Before Rebecca could argue, gunfire erupted from the bend behind them. Frank pushed her toward Olivia, already waiting at the forest edge. Go. Make this count. Rebecca hesitated only a fraction of a second, recognizing the tactical reality. Frank was giving them their only chance. "We'll send help," she promised, backing toward the trees. "Just finish what your husband started." Frank turned away, positioning himself behind the truck's engine block. Rifle braced for the approaching threat. Some things are worth dying for. Rebecca grabbed Olivia's hand and plunged into the forest, the sound of renewed gunfire propelling them forward. They ran blindly at first, putting distance between themselves and the road. Only when the sounds of combat faded did Rebecca slow their pace, orienting herself using the morning sun. "Is Frank going to be okay?" Olivia's voice trembled, though her legs kept moving. Rebecca couldn't bring herself to lie. "I don't know, sweetie. He's buying us time to get away." They pushed deeper into the forest, Rebecca checking the map Frank had given her. His cabin was marked in red about 4 miles from their current position. More importantly, the map showed hidden trails and caves, places known only to longtime locals. The distant crack of a rifle shot echoed through the trees, then another. Then silence. Rebecca set her jaw, forcing down the surge of emotion. Frank had made his choice. The best way to honor it was to escape with the evidence they'd risked everything to obtain. They altered course toward a series of ridges that would provide better cover. The terrain grew steeper, testing their already exhausted bodies. Olivia stumbled more frequently but refused to stop. "Just a little further," Rebecca encouraged, though she knew they still had miles to go. A new sound reached them, the mechanical whir of a helicopter. Rebecca looked up through breaks in the canopy to see a black chopper circling above the forest, following the road they'd abandoned. "They're bringing in air support," she muttered. "We need deeper cover." The map showed a ravine ahead with a seasonal stream. Rebecca guided them toward it, hoping the denser vegetation and natural depression would hide them from aerial observation. They reached the ravine's edge, finding it deeper than expected, nearly 20 feet down to the rocky stream bed. The sides were steep but navigable, covered with roots and undergrowth that would provide handholds. "We need to get down there," Rebecca explained, already searching for the safest route. "The trees will hide us from the helicopter." They descended carefully, Olivia going first with Rebecca guiding her foot placements. Halfway down, the helicopter's sound intensified, passing almost directly overhead. They pressed themselves against the ravine wall, using a fallen tree for additional cover. The aircraft completed several passes before the sound diminished, moving back toward the road and the abandoned truck. Rebecca released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They reached the bottom of the ravine, finding the stream reduced to a trickle in the summer heat. Moss-covered rocks provided reasonably dry footing as they followed the watercourse deeper into the forest. "Mom," Olivia spoke after several minutes of silent travel, "what did Frank mean about finishing what Dad started?" Rebecca considered how much to share with her daughter. The truth was dangerous, but Olivia had already seen and experienced enough to deserve honesty. "Your father discovered something corrupt within the FBI. People using their positions to help drug traffickers instead of stopping them. He was gathering evidence when he died. They killed him because he found out." "I believe so, and they made it look like an accident." Olivia absorbed this face, solemn beyond her years. "And the stuff we found in the house is proof," Rebecca patted her backpack. "It connects Blackwell and others to the operation. Names, dates, photos, enough to start a proper investigation if we can get it to the right people." The ravine gradually widened its sides, becoming less steep as it opened into a broader valley. According to the map, they were still 3 miles from Frank's cabin, but the terrain would be easier from this point. Rebecca checked her watch, 8:45 a.m. They'd been on the move for over 3 hours, evading professional trackers and armed pursuers. Exhaustion was becoming a serious concern, particularly for Olivia. "Let's rest for 5 minutes," she decided, finding a fallen tree hidden beneath a rock overhang. They drank sparingly from their water bottles, Rebecca sharing an energy bar from her pack. As they sat, she examined the documents they'd risked so much to obtain, confirming what she'd glimpsed in the hidden basement. The ledgers detailed a sophisticated operation: drugs seized in official raids diverted before reaching evidence, lockups transported to the Waterfall House for temporary storage, then redistributed through Blackwell's security company vehicles, which had clearance to enter federal buildings without inspection. The operation had begun small, just occasional packages skimmed from larger seizures. But over time, it had grown bolder, with entire shipments disappearing, replaced with doctored paperwork. Michael had noticed the discrepancies, launched his own investigation, and traced the pattern back to Blackwell. Most damning was a series of photographs showing the assistant director, Lawrence, meeting with Blackwell at various locations, including once at the waterfall property itself. The final image showed Lawrence signing papers in Blackwell's office, dated 1 week after Michael's death. "This is it," Rebecca whispered, the full scope of the conspiracy finally clear. The proof Michael died trying to find. Their brief rest concluded, they continued toward Frank's cabin, moving with renewed purpose despite their fatigue. The helicopter made occasional passes in the distance, but seemed to be concentrating its search closer to the road. The forest thinned as they approached a meadow that, according to the map, lay just beyond Frank's property. Rebecca approached cautiously, scanning for any sign of human presence before committing to crossing the open space. The meadow appeared deserted, wildflowers swaying in the morning breeze. Frank's cabin was visible at the far edge, smoke still rising from the chimney from the fire he'd lit before joining their mission. "It looks clear," Rebecca whispered, "but that doesn't mean it is. We'll skirt the edge through those trees, approach from behind." They circled the meadow, keeping to the forest shadows. Rebecca's instincts screamed caution. The cabin seemed too peaceful, too undisturbed given the manhunt underway for them. As they reached the rear of the property, the woodshed Frank had mentioned came into view, a small structure about 30 yards from the main cabin. Between it and them lay open ground with no cover. "We'll have to make a run for it," Rebecca decided after studying the terrain. The shed first, then assessed the situation. She crouched, meeting Olivia's tired eyes. "One more sprint, okay, then we can rest." Olivia nodded, summoning determination from some deep reserve. "I'm ready." They burst from the tree line together, running flat out toward the woodshed. Rebecca's eyes constantly scanned for movement, her hand near her weapon. 20 yards, 15-10. The cabin door slammed open. Rebecca shoved Olivia forward toward the shed while drawing her gun in one fluid motion, spinning to face the new threat. A man stood in the doorway, rifle raised. Not one of Blackwell's men in tactical gear, but a figure dressed in civilian clothes, his face partially obscured by a shadow. Rebecca aimed center mass, finger tensing on the trigger, when recognition hit her like a physical blow. The rifle lowered slightly, and the man stepped forward into the light. The world seemed to stop as impossible features resolved into a face she knew better than her own, older, harder, marked by a scar that hadn't been there before, but unmistakable. Michael. The name escaped her lips as a question, a prayer, an accusation. Her husband, her dead husband, stood before her, very much alive. Time froze as Rebecca stared at the man in the doorway. 6 years of grief collapsed into a single impossible moment. Michael's face, harder, leaner than she remembered, a jagged scar running along his jawline that hadn't been there before. His eyes, the same deep brown that she'd seen in Ethan's, watched her with an unreadable expression. The gun trembled in her grip. "You're dead. We buried you." Michael lowered his rifle completely, taking one cautious step forward. "Now you buried an unidentifiable body from the morgue, a John Doe with my ID." The words hit her like physical blows. Behind her, Olivia stood frozen in the woodshed doorway, her face a mask of confused shock. "Dad." The word emerged small, uncertain, as if Olivia couldn't trust her own eyes. Michael's composure cracked, his gaze shifting to his daughter. "Olivia, you've grown so much." Rebecca's tactical instincts overrode the emotional tsunami. She kept her weapon raised, positioning herself between Michael and Olivia. "Don't move. Explain. Now." "We don't have time." Michael gestured toward the cabin. "Blackwell's men are combing these mountains. The helicopter will circle back any minute." "Frank," Rebecca demanded. Pain flashed across Michael's features. "I found him at the road. He's alive, but barely. I got him to safety before coming here." Rebecca's mind raced, trying to process this resurrection while simultaneously assessing the tactical situation. The distant chop of helicopter blades decided for her. "Inside, but keep your distance." They entered the cabin, Michael leading Rebecca, following with her gun, still trained on his back, Olivia clutching her mother's jacket. The interior was sparse but functional, a main room with kitchen area, a bedroom visible through a partially open door, a wood stove providing heat. 6 years, Rebecca's voice shook with barely controlled fury. 6 years, we thought you were dead. We mourned you, Ethan, her voice caught. Michael's shoulders slumped at the mention of their son. "I know about Ethan. Not immediately, but I found out. He turned slowly, keeping his hands visible. The crash was meant for me. I wasn't supposed to survive. When I did, I knew I couldn't come back. They would have finished the job, and you and the kids would have been collateral damage. So you let us think you were dead. Let us bury someone we thought was you. The rage building inside her felt volcanic years of grief transmuting into white-hot anger. I had no choice. The conspiracy went higher than I'd realized. Assistant Director Lawrence, 3 field office chiefs, connections to senators. If I'd contacted you, they would have known I was alive. Rebecca's mind flashed to the evidence in her backpack, the photos showing Lawrence with Blackwell. You've been watching us. The waterfall house, you led me there. Michael nodded. Not directly. I couldn't risk direct contact. But I made sure Carson Reed offered you the house when you started looking in the area. I planted clues I knew you'd find. You manipulated me, used me as bait. The realization twisted like a knife. No, as a partner. You were FBI too, Rebecca. I knew if anyone could uncover the truth, it would be you. I tried to reach you after Ethan died, Michael added quietly. I got close to your apartment once, but there was a sniper watching your building. Another time I left a coded message for you, but they intercepted it. Each attempt put you in more danger. His voice broke. When I learned about the accident, I couldn't believe it wasn't random. The timing, the circumstances, Blackwell was sending me a message. What message? Rebecca demanded. That they could reach anyone I loved anytime. That was when I knew I couldn't risk contact until I had enough evidence to bring down the entire network at once. Olivia stepped forward suddenly, her small face tight with confusion and hurt. You let us think you were dead. You let Ethan die thinking you were gone. Michael flinched as if struck. He knelt slowly, bringing himself to Olivia's eye level. I did what I thought would keep you all safe. I was wrong. So wrong. And I've paid for that mistake every day. Rebecca kept the gun steady, though her arm ached with the effort. The drugs in the wall, Michael's ID tag, you planted those for me to find. To give you a starting point, the evidence I'd already gathered wasn't enough to take down the entire network. The helicopter sound grew louder, passing directly overhead. All 3 froze until it moved on. We need the cellar, Michael said, moving toward a rug in the center of the room. It's shielded, they won't detect our heat signatures. Rebecca hesitated, weighing options. The man before her was a ghost, a betrayal incarnate, yet the tactical situation demanded cooperation. Olivia, go first. I'll follow. Michael pulled back the rug, revealing a trap door. He lifted it, exposing a ladder descending into darkness. Olivia approached cautiously, looking to her mother for final confirmation before climbing down. The cellar was larger than Rebecca expected, reinforced with concrete and stocked with supplies, water, food, medical equipment, communications gear. One corner held a cot where a figure lay beneath blankets, an IV drip running into his arm. Frank, Rebecca hurried to the old sheriff's side gun, momentarily forgotten. His face was ashen, breathing labored, but his eyes opened at her voice. Knew you'd make it, he whispered, voice barely audible. Quite the reunion, eh? Rebecca turned accusingly to Michael. You know each other all this time. Frank's hand weakly caught her wrist. Don't blame him. I only found out he was alive 2 years ago. Caught him surveilling Blackwell's men near the waterfall. Nearly shot him before I recognized him. You could have told me, Rebecca said, the betrayal cutting deeper. Wasn't my secret to tell. Frank's eyes drifted closed, strength fading. He had his reasons. Michael checked the IV, adjusting the flow. 3 shotgun pellets near his lung. I've stabilized him, but he needs a hospital within the next few hours. Rebecca stood, creating distance again. Where were you all these years? Everywhere. Nowhere. Michael moved to a computer setup in another corner, typing rapidly. I spent the first year recovering from injuries that should have killed me. The next 5 building a case, tracking money, following shipments, identifying everyone involved in the network. While we suffered, while I buried our son alone. Michael's typing faltered, hands trembling momentarily. Every day I wanted to come back, every single day. He turned to face her fully. But they were watching you. If they'd suspected I was alive, if they'd seen any change in your behavior, suggesting you knew. So the great agent Stevens sacrificed his family for the case. The bitterness in Rebecca's voice could have corroded steel. Always the mission first. Nothing's changed. Something dangerous flashed in Michael's eyes. Everything changed. I lost my son. I lost you. I lost my life. The calm facade cracked, revealing raw pain beneath. You think I don't hate myself for not being there when Ethan died, for missing 6 years of Olivia's life, for letting you carry that burden alone? Olivia sat beside Frank, eyes moving between her parents like a spectator at a violent tennis match. Her face showed confusion giving way to understanding beyond her years. You're both right, she said quietly, and you're both wrong. The simple statement cut through the tension. Rebecca lowered her gun, finally holstering it at her hip. What's your plan? She asked, Michael, voice steadier. Personal recriminations could wait. Professional assessment took precedence. Michael turned back to the computer. We have 30 minutes before Blackwell's sweep reaches this sector. Frank has a Jeep hidden 2 miles from here, keys in that drawer. He nodded toward a small desk. Take it, get Frank to Memorial Hospital in Riverstone. I've alerted a trustworthy doctor there, he'll be waiting. And you, I'm going to upload everything we've both gathered to secure servers and selected journalists. Then I'll draw Blackwell's team away from your escape route. Rebecca shook her head. No, we go together or not at all. I didn't fight this hard to watch you disappear again. Someone needs to ensure the evidence gets out. If they catch us all, everything was for nothing. The reality of their situation crystallized in Rebecca's mind. The evidence in my backpack combined with what you've gathered, it's enough to bring down the entire network, expose everyone involved, and clear my name. Yes. Rebecca made a decision. We split up. I'll take Frank to the hospital with the physical evidence. You upload the digital files and meet us there. Michael's surprise was evident. You're trusting me. I'm making a tactical decision. Rebecca removed her backpack, extracting key documents. Take photos of these first. While Michael photographed the evidence, Rebecca checked Frank's vitals. His condition was deteriorating despite the emergency care. He's in hypovolemic shock, she said. We need to move now. Michael finished with the documents, returning them to Rebecca. The Jeep has a hidden compartment under the spare tire. Keep the evidence there in case you're stopped. Rebecca nodded, professional detachment, maintaining her composure. Olivia goes with you. Both Michael and Olivia started to protest, but Rebecca raised her hand. Frank needs my full attention. I can't keep watch for pursuers and tend to him simultaneously. Olivia will slow me down, making us both vulnerable. I want to stay with you, Olivia pleaded. I know, sweetie. Rebecca knelt before her daughter. But right now I need to know you're safe. Your father will protect you. She looked up at Michael, a silent warning in her gaze. If he failed their daughter again, there would be no forgiveness. The plan came together quickly. Michael provided detailed directions to the hidden Jeep while preparing the upload of all digital evidence to multiple secure destinations. Rebecca gathered medical supplies for Frank, creating a makeshift transport stretcher from materials in the cellar. We move in 5 minutes, Rebecca announced, checking her weapon and spare ammunition. As soon as the helicopter passes for its next sweep. Michael approached her, maintaining a respectful distance. Rebecca, if something goes wrong. Nothing goes wrong, not this time. Her voice left no room for alternatives. You get our daughter to safety, then you meet us at Riverstone Memorial. We finish this together. A proximity alarm beeps softly from the computer. Michael checked the display, tension visible in his shoulders. Someone's approaching from the south. Single heat signature, moving cautiously. Rebecca moved to Frank's side, preparing to move him. How long until they reach the cabin? 10 minutes at their current pace. That's our window. We move now while they're still far enough away. Michael nodded, gathering final equipment, a satellite phone, extra ammunition, a small medical kit. I'll head north with Olivia, then circle east through the ravine. Create electronic noise to draw the helicopter away from your route. Rebecca completed her preparations, then hesitated, looking at Michael fully for the first time without anger clouding her vision. The years had changed him, silver threading through his dark hair, new lines etched around his eyes, the scar along his jaw, creating an asymmetry that hadn't existed before. Yet underneath he was still Michael, her Michael whom she'd mourned for 6 years. I still don't understand how you survived the crash, she said, the question that had burned since his impossible appearance. I was thrown clear before the car went over. Crawled into the woods, passed out from blood loss. Hunter found me the next morning, took me to his cabin instead of a hospital. Paranoid old veteran who didn't trust the government. Saved my life. The helicopter sound returned, growing louder as it approached for another sweep. Time to move, Michael said, checking the cellar's concealed exit, a narrow passage leading to the woods behind the cabin. Rebecca helped Frank onto the improvised stretcher, securing him as best she could. The old sheriff's breathing was shallow but stable, his tough constitution fighting despite the severe blood loss. I'll go first, Michael said, opening the hidden door. Confirm the route is clear. He disappeared into the passage, returning minutes later. All clear. Helicopter just passed, heading toward the eastern ridge. We have a 7-minute window before it circles back. Rebecca nodded, emotion finally breaking through her professional facade. Livia, come here. Her daughter approached, tears streaming silently down her face. Rebecca embraced her fiercely. I'll see you at the hospital. Listen to your father, do exactly as he says. She pulled back, looking directly into Olivia's eyes. We're going to be okay. All of us. I promise. Olivia nodded, wiping tears with her sleeve. I love you, Mom. I love you too, more than anything. Rebecca turned to Michael, years of unspoken words hovering between them. Keep her safe. With my life, he promised. The certainty in his voice reminded her of the man she'd married, the father who had once held their children with such devotion. They moved quickly after that, Michael and Olivia heading north through the dense underbrush, while Rebecca navigated the difficult task of transporting Frank through the forest to the hidden jeep. The path was challenging, requiring frequent stops to adjust the stretcher and check Frank's condition. Each time the helicopter passed overhead, Rebecca froze beneath tree cover, counting seconds until the sound faded. Frank drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling instructions or warnings. His toughness impressed Rebecca. Many men half his age would have succumbed to such injuries hours ago. After 40 grueling minutes, she spotted the camouflage netting that concealed the jeep. The vehicle was older but well-maintained, keys hidden exactly where Michael had indicated. Rebecca secured Frank in the back seat, arranging blankets to stabilize him during transit. She was about to start the engine when a disturbing thought struck her. Michael knew exactly where this jeep was hidden. He'd known about Frank's cabin, about the cellar, about the secret passage. How long had he been watching them? How long had he been nearby while she grieved, while she struggled alone? The betrayal cut deeper with each new realization. Yet alongside the anger burned another emotion she wasn't ready to name. Relief, hope, longing. Michael was alive. Against all odds, against reason itself, her husband lived. She pushed the conflicting emotions aside, focusing on the immediate mission. Get Frank to the hospital, secure the evidence, end this conspiracy that had stolen 6 years from their lives. The jeep started smoothly, its engine quieter than expected. Rebecca navigated carefully through the rough terrain until reaching a logging road that would eventually connect to the highway. According to Michael's directions, Riverstone Memorial was 30 minutes away once they reached pavement. Frank stirred in the back seat. Rebecca, he called weakly, phone, glove compartment. She checked while keeping her eyes primarily on the difficult road. Inside the glove compartment sat an ancient flip phone, the kind that couldn't be easily tracked. Who am I calling? Speed dial 3, Sheriff Dawson. Tell him, Code Gray, Waterfall Road. Rebecca did as instructed, the call connecting after 2 rings. Frank, a young male voice answered. This is Rebecca Stevens. I'm with Frank Williams. He's been shot, critical condition. He said to tell you, Code Gray, Waterfall Road. A brief pause, then. Understood. I'm dispatching units to secure the route to Memorial. ETA to Main Highway. Approximately 10 minutes. I'll have deputies at the junction. They'll escort you in. The call ended as Rebecca navigated a particularly rough section of road. Frank had connections she hadn't realized, resources that might prove crucial in the hours ahead. True to the sheriff's word, 2 patrol cars waited at the highway junction, lights flashing. They immediately formed an escort, one leading, one following, as Rebecca accelerated toward Riverstone. Through the rearview mirror, she saw the black helicopter in the distance, circling the area they had left behind. Had Michael and Olivia made it clear? Was her daughter safe? The hospital appeared ahead, emergency staff already waiting with a gurney at the entrance. Rebecca pulled up directly to the doors of medical personnel, immediately moving to transfer Frank. GSW to the torso, multiple shotgun pellets. Significant blood loss, she reported as they worked. He's been given field plasma expanders and basic antibiotics. A doctor nodded, older, gray-haired, confident movements. I'm Dr. Hansen. Michael called ahead. We'll take good care of him. The name confirmation sent a wave of relief through Rebecca. At least that part of Michael's plan had worked. His evidence, the doctor asked quietly as orderlies wheeled Frank inside. Rebecca patted her backpack. Secure. My office, second floor end of the west hallway. Lock yourself in until I come for you. She followed his directions, navigating through the busy hospital corridors while maintaining constant awareness of her surroundings. Every face was a potential threat, every uniform a possible enemy. The conspiracy Michael had uncovered reached into law enforcement federal agencies, perhaps even this hospital. Dr. Hansen's office was exactly where he described, a corner room with windows overlooking the parking lot and main entrance. Rebecca locked the door behind her, positioning herself where she could observe approaches while remaining out of sight. She removed the satellite phone Michael had given her, powering it on to check for messages. Nothing yet. She glanced at her watch, nearly 2 hours since they'd separated. Michael and Olivia should have reached their destination by now if all had gone according to plan. A soft knock at the door startled her. She drew her weapon, approaching cautiously. Dr. Hansen, a voice called quietly. Rebecca unlocked the door, admitting the gray-haired doctor who had received Frank. He's in surgery, Hansen reported, closing and relocking the door. Good chance of recovery. Frank's too stubborn to die easily. Thank you. Rebecca holstered her weapon. Any word from Michael? Not directly, but my security contacts report the helicopter has moved toward the eastern ridge. He's drawing them away as planned. Rebecca nodded, processing this information. How do you know, Michael? Vietnam. I was a combat medic when his father served. Years later, Michael sought me out when he needed medical help off the books. Hansen's expression grew somber. I treated him after the crash. Massive internal bleeding, broken ribs, punctured lung. By all rights, he should have died. Yet you never told me he was alive. He made that choice, not me. Doctor-patient confidentiality aside, I understood his reasoning. The people hunting him wouldn't hesitate to eliminate his family to draw him out. Rebecca turned away, the familiar anger rising again. Everyone keeps telling me they were protecting us by lying. Meanwhile, my son is dead and my daughter grew up without her father. Hansen had no response to this truth. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder briefly before moving toward the door. I need to check on Frank. There's a secure landline on the desk if you need to call out. The nurse's station will bring you anything you need. After he left, Rebecca positioned herself by the window again, scanning the parking lot and surrounding areas. No sign of unusual activity, no suspicious vehicles. Yet the sense of being watched persisted. The satellite phone buzzed, a text message appearing on the small screen. Package secure, heading to secondary location. Signal compromised. Will contact through H, Michael's code. Michael's. Olivia was safe. They'd been unable to reach the hospital directly due to surveillance. They would contact her through Hansen. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by renewed concern. If Michael couldn't approach the hospital, Blackwell's men might already be watching the building. She needed to secure the evidence beyond any possibility of interception. Rebecca emptied her backpack, organizing the documents and photos they'd retrieved from the waterfall house. The ledgers detailed hundreds of shipments, over 5 years, millions in diverted drugs. The surveillance photos clearly showed Assistant Director Lawrence meeting with Blackwell in compromising situations. Most damning was a memo signed by Lawrence authorizing the destruction of evidence from a major bust, evidence that, according to the ledgers, had been diverted to the waterfall house instead. She used the office computer to create digital copies, encrypting them on a flash drive from her emergency kit. Next, she took photos of key documents with the satellite phone, sending them to an encrypted email address she and Michael had used years ago for sensitive communications. A commotion in the hallway caught her attention. Raised voices, the sound of multiple footsteps approaching rapidly. Rebecca gathered the original documents, securing them in the backpack again, while drawing her weapon. The door handle jiggled, someone testing if it was locked. Then a key turned in the lock. Rebecca positioned herself behind the desk, gun aimed at the entrance. Dr. Hansen entered first, hands raised slightly. It's just me, he said quietly. Behind him stood a uniformed sheriff's deputy, young, nervous, but determined. This is Deputy Reynolds, Hansen explained. Sheriff Dawson sent him. There are federal agents in the building and asking about Frank. FBI, Rebecca asked, not lowering her weapon. The deputy shook his head. They claim to be, but their credentials look wrong to me. Sheriff taught us to spot fakes. How many? 4 that I've seen. 2 at main entrance, 2 heading towards surgery. Rebecca made a quick decision. We need to move Frank now. Impossible, Hansen said. He's mid-procedure. Then we need to secure the surgical area, and I need a place to hide this evidence where they won't find it. The deputy stepped forward. Sheriff has a secure room in the basement, evidence lockup for sensitive cases. I have access. Rebecca hesitated, evaluating the young man. His uniform was crisp, his manner professional, despite obvious anxiety. His eyes met hers steadily, no deception visible. Lead the way, she decided, gathering her backpack. Hansen, can you secure the surgical floor? No one unauthorized gets near Frank. The doctor nodded grimly. I'll call in some favors. Half the staff are veterans who owe me. They moved quickly, the deputy leading Rebecca through a service corridor to avoid main hallways. The hospital was large for a rural facility with multiple wings and several entrances. Sheriff has the building blueprints on his phone, Reynolds explained as they descended a maintenance stairwell. He's coordinating with hospital security to isolate the fake agents without alerting them. The basement level was cooler, dimly lit with exposed pipes running along the ceiling. They passed storage rooms and maintenance areas before reaching a heavy metal door marked County Evidence, authorized personnel only. Reynolds used a keycard and numeric code to open it, revealing a small, climate-controlled room with evidence lockers lining the walls. He approached a floor-to-ceiling cabinet, unlocking it to expose a hidden safe. Only the sheriff and 2 deputies have the combination, he explained, stepping back to give Rebecca privacy. She secured the backpack in the safe, keeping only the flash drive and satellite phone with her. As Reynolds locked the cabinet, the phone buzzed again. Another message from Michael. 4 hostiles at hospital, more inbound, extraction necessary. Rebecca showed the deputy. We need to move. Now. Reynolds nodded, leading her back to the stairwell. Sheriff wants you at the ambulance bay. We have a vehicle waiting. I can't leave Frank unprotected. Sheriff stationed 4 deputies outside surgery. Dr. Hansen has his own security in place. Your evidence is what they want most. You need to clear the area with it. The logic was sound, though abandoning Frank felt wrong. Still, the priority had to be securing the evidence and connecting with Michael and Olivia. They reached the ground floor, Reynolds checking the hallway before signaling Rebecca forward. The ambulance bay was visible through double doors at the end of the corridor. Through the window, she could see a sheriff's department SUV, waiting engine running. Go, Reynolds urged. I'll cover your exit. Rebecca moved toward the doors, maintaining awareness of all angles of approach. She was halfway there when a commotion erupted behind her, shouting a crash, the sound of a scuffle. She turned to see Reynolds struggling with a man in a dark suit, both grappling for control of a weapon. 2 more suits appeared at the far end of the corridor, drawing firearms. Rebecca made an instant decision, reversing course to help the deputy. She charged the nearest attacker, using her momentum and FBI combat training to disarm him with a precision strike to his wrist, followed by an elbow to the temple. He dropped unconscious. Reynolds had managed to subdue his opponent, slamming the man's head against a wall with enough force to daze him, but the 2 approaching agents were now raising their weapons. Down, Rebecca shouted, pulling Reynolds into a recessed doorway as bullets struck the wall behind them. She returned fire, forcing the attackers to seek cover. The confined space of the hospital corridor limited their options. No clear escape route presented itself, with armed men blocking their path. Back door, she asked Reynolds between exchanges of gunfire. He shook his head. They'll have it covered. The satellite phone buzzed again. Rebecca checked it while reloading. Northeast corner, 2nd floor. Window. 2 minutes. Michael, he was orchestrating an extraction from outside. We need to get to the 2nd floor, northeast corner, she told Reynolds. Can we reach it from here? The deputy nodded toward a door behind them. Service elevator. Maintenance key required. You have it. Reynolds produced a ring of keys from his belt. Standard issue. They retreated into the maintenance area, Reynolds unlocking the service elevator while Rebecca provided cover. The small elevator ascended slowly, painfully exposed if anyone discovered their escape route. 2nd floor. Reynolds led the way through storage areas and narrow corridors used by hospital staff. The northeast corner, according to his knowledge of the building, contained a row of examination rooms currently unused due to renovations. They reached the specified location, a room with large windows overlooking a wooded area behind the hospital. Below, barely visible through the trees, idled an ambulance with its lights off. The window was sealed shut, designed not to open. Rebecca used the butt of her gun to break the glass, clearing the sharp edges as best she could. 20-foot drop, Reynolds observed, peering down. Look again. Rebecca pointed to a fire escape ladder that had been raised to just below their position. It hadn't been there initially. Michael had deployed it silently while they made their way to the room. A shot rang out behind them. One of the suited men had found their location. Reynolds cried out, falling forward as a bullet struck his shoulder. Rebecca returned fire, forcing the attacker back into the corridor. "Can you climb?" she asked the injured deputy. Reynolds nodded through gritted teeth, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Go first. I'll follow." Rebecca hesitated, unwilling to abandon the wounded man. "Together," she insisted, helping him toward the window. They had just reached the opening when the door burst open again. This time, two attackers entered simultaneously from different angles. Rebecca shoved Reynolds toward the window while turning to engage the threats. A bullet grazed her arm as she fired, dropping one attacker. The second man charged, tackling her before she could adjust her aim. They crashed into medical equipment, grappling for control. The man was larger, stronger, but Rebecca had years of FBI training and the desperate motivation of a mother trying to reach her child. She struck vulnerable points, throat, eyes, groin, fighting with controlled ferocity. A sharp pain exploded in her side as the man produced a knife, slashing wildly. Rebecca caught his wrist on the second attempt, twisting until bones cracked. The knife clattered to the floor. She delivered a final devastating blow to his temple, scrambling away as he collapsed. Blood soaked her shirt where the knife had connected, but adrenaline masked the pain for now. Reynolds had managed to climb onto the window ledge despite his injury. He reached back to help her. "Come on." Rebecca limped to the window, her side burning with each movement. Below, she could see movement near the ambulance, someone in the driver's seat watching the window. Michael. She was halfway through the window when glass shattered behind her, another attacker firing from the doorway. Reynolds jerked backward as a bullet struck him in the back. His grip on Rebecca faltered, eyes widening in shock. "Go," he gasped, shoving her toward the ladder before collapsing. Rebecca lost her balance, tumbling out the window. Her hands caught the ladder at the last second, pain shooting through her injured side as her body slammed against the metal rungs. More shots rang out from above as she descended rapidly, blood making her grip slippery. The ground rushed up to meet her, the final few rungs passing in a blur of pain and desperate momentum. She half fell, half jumped the last few feet, landing hard on the ground below. Hands immediately gripped her arms, pulling her toward the waiting ambulance. "Mom!" Olivia's voice cut through the haze of pain and adrenaline. Rebecca allowed herself to be helped into the ambulance, collapsing onto a gurney as the door slammed shut behind her. Michael was already accelerating away from the hospital, driving with the lights and sirens off to avoid drawing attention. "Reynolds," she gasped, pressing a hand to her bleeding side. "He's still up there. Shot." "I called it in," Michael replied from the driver's seat. "Sheriff's team is converging on that room now. They'll get to him." Olivia hovered anxiously as Rebecca assessed her own injury. The knife had sliced across her ribs, painful and bleeding freely, but not immediately life-threatening if properly treated. "First aid kit," she instructed Olivia, who immediately located the supplies stored in the ambulance's cabinets. With her daughter's help, Rebecca cleaned and bandaged the wound as best she could while the ambulance navigated back roads away from Riverstone. "Frank," she asked, gritting her teeth against the pain. "Still in surgery when we arrived," Michael answered. "Dr. Hansen has him under protection. The evidence secure in the sheriff's lockup. I sent digital copies to both our emergency accounts." Michael nodded, visible relief in his expression. "Good, very good. Where are we going?" Rebecca pressed a fresh bandage against her side, the bleeding finally slowing. "Safe house about 60 miles from here. Hansen's property off the grid. We'll regroup, treat your wound properly, then make our next move." Rebecca lay back on the gurney, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over her. Discovering Michael alive, the firefight at the waterfall house, Frank's injury, the hospital escape. And through it all, the impossible reality that her husband had been alive for 6 years while she grieved. Olivia sat beside her, holding her hand with surprising strength. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know, sweetie." Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand. But you're safe now. We all are. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. They were far from safe. Blackwell's network had infiltrated law enforcement, federal agencies, and local institutions. The evidence they'd gathered would expose powerful people who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. And Michael, the man driving the ambulance, remained an enigma. Husband, father ghost manipulator. She had trusted him with Olivia's safety, worked alongside him to escape the hospital, yet the chasm of his 6-year absence yawned between them, unbridgeable. The ambulance turned onto an unpaved road, jostling painfully over ruts and stones. Rebecca winced, adjusting her position to minimize discomfort. Almost there, Michael called back. 10 more minutes. Darkness had fallen, the ambulance's headlights providing the only illumination on the narrow forest road. Through the rear windows, Rebecca could see no signs of pursuit, but that offered limited reassurance. With resources like helicopters and potentially satellite surveillance, Blackwell's people didn't need to maintain visual contact to track them. The safe house appeared suddenly, a modern cabin nestled among ancient pines, solar panels visible on the roof, a generator humming quietly nearby. Michael parked the ambulance in a covered carport attached to the structure, concealing it from aerial observation. "Stay here until I clear the building," he instructed, retrieving a handgun from beneath the driver's seat. Rebecca struggled to sit up. "I should come with you." "You're injured." Michael's tone brooked no argument. 5 minutes. If you don't hear from me by then, there's a secondary vehicle in the shed out back. Keys are in the visor. He disappeared into the darkness, moving with the silent efficiency she remembered from their FBI days. Olivia helped Rebecca sit upright, worry evident in her young face. "He'll be okay," Rebecca assured her, though uncertainty colored her voice. 4 minutes later, Michael returned. "All clear. Let's get you inside." The cabin's interior was surprisingly well-equipped, modern medical supplies, communication equipment, weapons, and enough provisions for weeks. Michael helped Rebecca to a bedroom with an attached bathroom, clearly prepared for treating injuries. "Dr. Hansen uses this place to help veterans who can't access proper care," Michael explained, gathering medical supplies. "Some suffer PTSD too severe for conventional hospitals. Others have injuries they can't explain to authorities." Olivia stood awkwardly in the doorway, watching as Michael laid out bandages, antiseptic suture kits. "Sweetie, can you check the kitchen?" Rebecca asked gently. "See if there's any food we can prepare quickly." After Olivia left, Rebecca fixed Michael with a hard stare. "The truth, all of it. Now." And he paused in his preparations, shoulders slumping slightly. "Where do you want me to start?" "The crash. What really happened?" Michael sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "I was getting close to exposing Blackwell and Lawrence. Too close. Someone tampered with the brakes on my bureau vehicle. When I realized they weren't responding on that mountain road, I tried to steer into an embankment rather than go over the edge. But the reports were falsified. I was thrown from the vehicle before it went over, crawled into the woods badly injured. A local hunter found me the next morning, took me to his cabin instead of a hospital because he didn't trust authorities. Probably saved my life. And after you recovered 6 years, Michael." Pain flashed across his features. "By then, the funeral had happened. You and the kids were under surveillance. I had no resources, no backup, no way to protect you if I revealed myself." He looked down at his hands. "I convinced myself you were safer believing I was dead, while I gathered enough evidence to bring down the entire network." "We weren't safer. Ethan died." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation. "I know." Michael's voice cracked. "When I found out, I almost gave up everything, almost revealed myself. But by then, Blackwell's operation had grown. More people involved, higher stakes. I told myself that completing the mission was the only way to give Ethan's death meaning. I don't believe that was a random accident either," he added quietly. "The timing, the circumstances. I've spent years trying to find a connection, proof that they targeted him to send me a message." Rebecca studied him, seeing both the man she'd married and a stranger, shaped by years of isolation and single-minded purpose. And the waterfall house, why lead me there? It was their primary staging area for years. After the Harmons disappeared, Blackwell continued using it occasionally, believing it secure. "I discovered it about 4 years ago, began documenting shipments, photographing meetings, but I needed more internal documents. Ledger's direct evidence of Lawrence's involvement. So you manipulated me into buying it knowing I'd investigate anything connected to you. Michael nodded slowly. I underestimated how quickly you'd find the hidden compartment. Had to accelerate my timeline when you discovered the drugs and my ID tag. You were watching us the whole time, even when we were cleaning the house. Not always directly. Motion sensors, remote cameras. I needed to know if Blackwell's people returned while you were there. Rebecca processed this information, anger competing with tactical understanding. And Frank, when did he become involved? 2 years ago, he caught me surveilling the property, recognized me, despite the changes. Michael gestured to the scar along his jaw. Instead of exposing me, he offered help. Said he'd always suspected my death wasn't accidental. The conversation paused as Olivia returned, reporting that the kitchen contained pasta, canned sauce, and other basic supplies. Rebecca instructed her to prepare something simple while Michael treated the knife wound. Once Olivia was occupied in the kitchen, Michael helped Rebecca remove her blood-soaked shirt, revealing the ugly gash along her ribs. He worked with professional efficiency, cleaning the wound, applying local anesthetic, preparing to close it. This needs stitches, he observed. 6, maybe 7. Rebecca nodded, steeling herself. As he worked, the familiar scent of him, altered but recognizable beneath hospital antiseptic and forest dirt, triggered cascading memories. Michael bandaging a cut on her hand during FBI training. Michael pacing the delivery room before Ethan's birth. Michael teaching Olivia to ride a bicycle. I never stopped loving you, he said quietly, securing the final stitch. Even when I convinced myself staying away was the right choice. Rebecca remained silent, the pain of betrayal still too fresh, despite the circumstances. The evidence we've gathered, she said instead, redirecting to the mission. What's our next move? Michael accepted the change of subject with a slight nod. I've uploaded everything to secure servers. Copies went to 3 journalists I've cultivated relationships with, people who can't be bought or threatened easily, and to a special prosecutor I trust in Washington. Timeline. The journalist will publish tomorrow morning simultaneously. The prosecutor has a sealed indictment ready, just needed final confirmation on Lawrence's direct involvement, which your photos provided. Rebecca winced as Michael applied a sterile bandage over the stitched wound. And Blackwell, he'll be named in the indictments, but he's smart. Probably already has an extraction plan, offshore accounts, alternate identity. Michael's jaw tightened. That's why we need to find him before the story breaks. How? He has resources, manpower, a head start. I've been tracking his movements for years. He has a pattern. When feeling threatened, retreats to a private compound in the mountains about 100 miles from here. Completely self-sufficient, heavily guarded. Rebecca considered this information. You want to go after him directly? Just the 2 of us against a fortified position with professional security. 3 of us, Olivia called from the doorway, her young face set in determination. I'm not staying behind again. Both parents turned, surprised by her sudden appearance and the resolve in her voice. Absolutely not, Rebecca began. I've lost enough time with both of you, Olivia interrupted. I'm not losing more. The steel in her voice, so like her father's, momentarily silenced both adults. Michael recovered first. Olivia, what your mother means is that this isn't... I know what she means, but I also know that separating hasn't worked out well for this family. The girl's eyes glistened with unshed tears. We stay together from now on, no matter what. In that moment, Rebecca saw beyond the 12-year-old's physical appearance to the old soul underneath, a child forced to mature too quickly by loss and hardship. We stay together, she agreed quietly, but that doesn't mean you'll be part of any operation against Blackwell. That's non-negotiable. Olivia seemed to recognize the compromise for what it was, nodding reluctantly. Let's get some food and rest, Michael suggested, packing away the medical supplies. We'll finalize the plan in the morning. As he left to help Olivia with dinner, Rebecca eased herself into a sitting position, testing the limits of her newly stitched wound. The pain was manageable. She'd function at perhaps 70% capacity, enough for what might lie ahead. The satellite phone buzzed on the nightstand, a new message from an unknown number. William stable, evidence secure, location compromised, move immediately. Rebecca called Michael back, showing him the warning. His expression hardened as he read it. We can't trust the channel, he said. This could be legitimate from Hanson or Sheriff Dawson Or it could be Blackwell's people trying to flush us out. Either way, we can't stay here, Rebecca decided. If there's even a chance the safe house is compromised. A distant sound interrupted her, the faint but unmistakable chop of helicopter rotors approaching. Michael moved to the window, peering through a gap in the blinds. No lights. They're running dark. How did they find us so quickly? Rebecca struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain flaring in her side. Tracker on the ambulance, Michael realized. They let us escape to follow us here. The situation crystallized with terrible clarity. They had perhaps minutes before Blackwell's team surrounded the cabin. An injured woman, a child, and one man against unknown numbers of professional operatives. Michael moved with practiced efficiency, retrieving weapons from a hidden compartment in the closet. There's a tunnel system beneath the cabin. Hansen built it as an emergency escape route, leads to a cave system half a mile away. Rebecca pulled on a clean shirt from the supplies in the room, accepting a pistol and spare magazines from Michael. What about transport once we're through? ATV hidden near the exit. One vehicle, but it'll have to do. Olivia appeared in the doorway, face pale but composed. I heard the helicopter. Michael crossed to her, placing his hands on her shoulders. Remember what I taught you on the way here, about staying calm and following instructions precisely? When she nodded, he continued. We're going to use a secret passage to leave safely. I need you to do exactly as your mother and I say without hesitation. Can you do that? Yes. The girl's voice was steady despite her evident fear. Good. Get your jacket and nothing else. We move in 60 seconds. As Olivia hurried to comply, Rebecca caught Michael's arm. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen, he interrupted, voice hard with certainty. I've lost one child. I won't lose another. In that moment, Rebecca glimpsed the toll of the past 6 years on Michael, the isolation, the single-minded focus, the weight of decisions made in solitude. He had lived with the consequences of his choice every day, believing it necessary to protect them. Right or wrong, he had suffered too. The helicopter sound grew louder now, circling the property. Flashlights flickered through the trees surrounding the cabin as ground teams moved into position. Time to go, Michael said, leading them to the kitchen pantry. He pressed a hidden switch, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. As Rebecca guided Olivia into the passage, she cast one last glance at the cabin that had briefly promised safety. Whatever happened next, there would be no more hiding, no more separation. The family that had been shattered 6 years ago was reunited, however damaged and changed. The time for secrets was over. The time for justice had come. 18 months later, Rebecca stood on the small bridge leading to the waterfall house, watching the afternoon sun create rainbows in the mist. The property had changed dramatically. The house renovated the grounds, landscaped a new dock extending into the stream below the falls. Frank Williams approached from behind his steps, slower but steadier than when she'd last seen him. The old sheriff had made a full recovery, though he now walked with a slight limp. First group arrives tomorrow, he said, joining her at the railing. 6 families. Sheriff Dawson's organizing the welcome barbecue. Rebecca nodded, satisfaction warming her, despite the cool mountain air. The cabins are ready, medical supplies stocked, everything set. The Haven, as they now called it, had been her idea, a retreat for the families of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. The waterfall house served as the main building with 6 small cabins built nearby to accommodate guests. The FBI had provided funding, part of their effort to make amends after the scandal broke. The Blackwell-Lawrence conspiracy had shaken federal law enforcement to its core. 17 officials eventually faced charges, from field agents to the assistant director himself. The case had made national headlines for weeks, with Michael's testimony proving crucial in securing convictions. Victor Blackwell had never stood trial. When federal agents raided his mountain compound, they had found him dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, surrounded by half-packed suitcases and offshore banking documents. Where's Michael? Frank asked, scanning the property. At the shooting range with Olivia. Rebecca smiled slightly. Teaching her marksmanship. She's getting quite good. Their reconciliation had been neither quick nor easy. The months following their escape from the safe house had been filled with difficult conversations, tears, and slowly rebuilding trust. There were still moments when the anger would return, when the weight of 6 lost years seemed unbearable. But they had found their way back to each other, step by painful step. You know, Frank said thoughtfully, when I caught Michael surveilling the property, that first time I almost shot him before I recognized his face. He was so focused on protecting you two that he'd gotten sloppy, wasn't thinking like an agent anymore. Hard to maintain professional detachment when family's involved, Rebecca observed. Frank nodded. He told me then that he'd give anything to come back to you, but he was convinced it would put you in more danger. The old man leaned on the railing. I'm not saying he was right, just that he believed it with everything he had. I know. Rebecca's gaze drifted to where Michael and Olivia were now visible, walking up from the range together. Her daughter was laughing at something he'd said, her face alight with happiness. They had all changed. Olivia had grown 3 inches, her childhood trauma gradually healing as she reconnected with her father. Michael had softened somewhat, the years of isolation giving way to a renewed appreciation for family. And Rebecca herself had found purpose beyond grief, beyond anger, in creating the haven. As they approached the bridge, Rebecca felt the weight of Michael's ID tag against her chest. She still wore it no longer as a reminder of loss, but as a symbol of resilience, of finding truth behind the waterfall where the noise of the world faded away. Ready to show them the new classroom space? Michael asked as they reached her. Rebecca nodded, taking his outstretched hand. Together they walked toward the house that had once held so many secrets, and now offered healing instead. Behind them, the waterfall continued its endless descent, a constant reminder that even the hardest stone could be shaped by persistent force. Given enough time, even the deepest wounds could begin to heal.